Grace Wood pushed her mop across the polished linoleum floor of the bustling high school corridor, the steady rhythm of her work a grounding contrast to the chaos around her. The lunch bell had just rung, releasing a flood of teenagers into the hallways, their voices bouncing against the lockers and ceilings. Grace moved quietly, her focus on the task at hand, her plain uniform blending into the background. She carried a quiet dignity, though her eyes betrayed a weariness that came from years of long shifts and unnoticed efforts. At 17, many of the students hardly registered her presence beyond the occasional nod or hurried apology as they slipped past. Today was no different, but beneath the normal school bustle, a familiar discomfort brewed. A small group of students, led by a girl named Madison, lingered by the lockers, their laughter sharp and pointed. Madison's eyes locked onto Grace as she passed, an amused smirk playing at her lips. "Look who's still stuck with the mop," Madison drawled loud enough for those nearby to hear. Her friends snickered, and a few other students turned to glance at Grace, their expressions ranging from curiosity to mild amusement. Grace quickened her pace, clutching her mop handle with a bit more force, trying to retreat from the growing attention. Madison called after her, louder this time, "Hey, janitor. Don't you have some floors to ruin?" The words cut through the chatter, eliciting sharp giggles from the group. Grace's breath caught. She lowered her gaze but sensed the eyes of the crowd upon her, the world narrowing to that uncomfortable spotlight. Just as tension rippled through the hallway, a firm voice broke the hum of murmurs. The principal stepped forward from nearby, his gaze calm but authoritative, and addressed the students directly. The word "ma'am" came from his lips with a weight that silenced the crowd instantly. The hallway froze as Principal Daniels' voice echoed with unexpected firmness. "That's enough," he said, looking directly at Madison and her group. The sharp laughter died away, replaced by a hush that made the space feel suddenly vast and still. "Grace Wood deserves the same respect as anyone else in this school," he added, his eyes unwavering. Madison frowned, her smirk faltering but not disappearing. She crossed her arms and volleyed back, lips curling with a trace of defiance. "But it's just the janitor, sir. Isn't she? Cleaning up after us, sweeping the mess we make. She doesn't exactly walk these halls as one of us." Her voice carried that cruel, casual arrogance that comes from the unquestioned belief in social hierarchies. Her friends exchanged glances, some still emboldened by the moment, others quieter, sensing the subtle shift in authority. Grace's shoulders tightened. She felt the sting of humiliation flush across her cheeks, despite the principal's protection. The laughter, the whispers, and the pointed looks had left a knot in her stomach. She fumbled with the mop's handle, glancing around at the sea of eyes, not all hostile, but none openly supportive. Principal Daniels took a careful step forward, his expression softening just enough to show he recognized Grace's discomfort. "Grace, would you come with me to my office, please?" he asked, tender but firm. Grace hesitated, caught at the intersection of embarrassment and relief. The students' stares lingered, a mixture of confusion and whispers spreading like ripples in a pond. The murmurs began again as Grace turned toward the doorway leading to the administration area. Madison's voice pierced the quiet once more, though now tinged with uncertainty. "Why is she even getting special treatment? She's just a janitor." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, inviting others to echo the thought. Grace kept her pace steady, unwilling to meet those eyes. She fought the urge to flee completely, to escape the humiliation mounting with every step and retreat into the safety of her solitary world. But Principal Daniels walked beside her, a silent shield against their cruelty. As the door closed behind them, the buzzing of students resumed, layered with speculation and shifting alliances. Some students rolled their eyes, dismissing the whole episode as overblown, while others exchanged thoughtful glances, the seed of doubt sown in their minds. Inside the principal's office, the atmosphere was markedly different, quiet, cool, and private. Grace took a moment to gather herself, fingers tightening around the mop bucket handle that had followed her in. Daniels gestured toward the chair behind his desk, inviting her to sit. Taking the seat, Grace inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the day's indignities and the unexpected attention from the school's authority figure. She expected perhaps a reprimand or a quick lesson for the students, but what came next neither of them anticipated. Daniel's tone shifted, becoming more serious and measured. "Grace, I want you to know that you're respected here. Not just by me, but by many in the school, even if it doesn't always show." He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm aware of the challenges you face, the judgments, the unfairness. That's why I need your help." Grace blinked, curiosity overtaking her earlier embarrassment. "My help?" she echoed quietly. "Yes." Daniel smiled slightly, a flicker of enthusiasm breaking through. "I want you to speak to a group of students later this week. Some of them need to hear from someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated, who can speak about respect and responsibility in a way they'll truly understand." Grace hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something she'd ever considered, especially in front of students who had just been mocking her. But beneath the hesitation, a slow-burning confidence kindled. She thought of the countless days spent invisible in the halls, the quiet strength it took to keep going. Perhaps this was the moment to say something real. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, the students gathered around, their chatter filling the air with opinions about what had just happened. "I don't get it," said Simon, a lanky boy leaning against a locker. "Why would the principal call her ma'am like that? It's kind of weird, right?" Madison glared at him, glaring like any challenge to her position was a personal affront. "He's just messing with us. Doesn't mean anything." From a distance, others listened, the conversation fragmenting. Meanwhile, Grace left the office with Daniels after a moment's pause. Her posture had shifted slightly, softer but resolute. Walking back into the hall, the same students now looked her over with fresh eyes, not quite respect, but a hint of reconsideration. A few younger students whispered among themselves, their tone less mocking, more curious. And for the first time that day, Grace met a pair of kind looks that didn't feel pitying or dismissive. Madison, however, refused to be shaken so easily. She stepped forward, confronting Grace with a smirk threaded with derision. "So, what's this all about? You expecting a standing ovation or something?" Grace met her gaze steadily. "I'm not here to impress anyone," she said quietly. "I just want to be treated like a person." Her words rippled through the gathered crowd, unexpected in their calm clarity. Some students exchanged uncertain glances. A few girls shifted uncomfortably, memories of their own judgments flickering in their minds. Madison, however, frowned, her authority challenged yet not yet broken. "We'll see about that," she muttered, turning away with a huff. Grace wiped a stray strand of hair back from her face, aware of the spotlight lingering but no longer shrinking from it. She felt the sting of the moment still, but also the embers of something new, a chance to change how she was seen. Later that afternoon, after her shift ended, Grace retreated to a small cafe near the school. She pulled out her phone and called her friend Carla, the familiarity of the voice on the other end grounding her. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Carla," she admitted, voice low over the clatter of cups and conversation. "Speaking in front of those kids, after everything, it's terrifying." Carla's reassuring tone came through instantly. "Grace, you're stronger than you think. They're the ones who need to listen, not the other way around. You've got this." Grace smiled weakly, grateful for the support. She hung up but felt no sudden resolve, only a cautious hope that maybe this challenge was the beginning of something meaningful. That evening, as the school emptied and the sun dipped below the horizon, the thought lingered, what if this time, the students would see her differently? Yet beneath that hope lay a knot of uncertainty. Madison's eyes had been sharp, the sting of their words still fresh. The question hovered, would the principal's intervention be enough to turn the tide? Or was this just another episode in a pattern of being overlooked and underestimated? The morning dawned, bringing with it the usual bustle, but also an air of anticipation in the school corridors. Whispers of Grace's upcoming talk spread, mixing excitement with skepticism. Students who had once laughed now watched with cautious curiosity. Grace arrived early, readying herself quietly in the small space allocated for her speech. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart beat with steady determination. This moment was hers to own. As the bell rang and students gathered in the auditorium, Madison sat near the front, eyes narrowed, arms crossed. The challenge hadn't faded. Grace took the stage, every eye fixed on her. A wave of silence swept over the room, thick with expectation and doubt. She inhaled deeply, the mop, the corridor, the cafeteria, all the small, unseen moments she had lived, now building into a strength she was ready to share. What followed would not only redefine Grace in their eyes but would challenge the very doubts that had shadowed her for so long. Grace stood at the podium, the bright auditorium lights casting a warm glow over the rows of expectant faces. The students shifted in their seats, whispers tapering to silence as she cleared her throat. Her palms were slightly damp, but her voice, when it came, was steady and calm. "Thank you for giving me this time," Grace began, her tone measured and sincere. "I know some of you might be wondering why a janitor is standing here, speaking to you about respect and responsibility." She paused, allowing the words to settle. "I'm here because, just like many of you, I've faced judgment based on how I look, what I do, and where I come from. And because I believe that defines none of us." At that, a few students exchanged uneasy glances, a whisper fluttering through the rows as curiosity replaced skepticism. Madison's eyes narrowed, but Grace pressed on. "Sometimes we box people into roles and forget that everyone's story is deeper than their job title or appearance," she explained. "I've spent years working here at the school, making sure it's clean and welcoming for you, but that's not all I do. I also lecture at a local university on leadership and personal development, helping others find their own pathways beyond the assumptions people make about them." The room shifted again, the disbelief hardly masked now by the students trying to process the revelation. A few jaws tightened in surprise, including Madison's, whose confident posture flickered with an unfamiliar uncertainty. Grace's voice softened but grew stronger, driven by conviction. "I dress simply because I want to connect with you, as a peer, not as someone distant or untouchable. I know what it feels like to be underestimated, to be invisible. But I also know that how others see us doesn't have to limit what we can become." She looked across the sea of young faces, noting the change unfolding, the bravado draining from some, replaced by interest, the judgment replaced with curiosity. One student in the front row, Simon, leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Grace offered him a warm nod, appreciative of the silent support. "Respect isn't about who's above or below," Grace continued, "it's about recognizing the humanity in others. It's about kindness, responsibility, and understanding that every role matters." She paused, glancing briefly toward the exit where Principal Daniels observed with a proud, approving smile that encouraged her to continue. Madison's lips pressed tightly together. When Grace finished, there was a flicker of movement. Madison stood abruptly, breaking the silence. A low murmur spread through the crowd as she took a step forward. "I didn't realize," Madison began haltingly, voice softer now, lacking the earlier sharpness. "I thought you were just the janitor. I guess I never thought about what else you do or who you really are." There was a vulnerability in her confession that caught everyone off guard, including herself. Grace nodded gently. "It's easy to judge without knowing. But sharing our stories helps us see each other differently." Another student murmured agreement, a ripple of murmuring conversations breaking out as many began to talk quietly among themselves, their perspectives shifting. For the first time, the auditorium buzzed with an energy different from before, one not of mockery but reflection. Later, in the hallway outside the auditorium, Madison found Grace alone near a locker, collecting her belongings. Her steps were hesitant but determined. "Grace," Madison said quietly, eyes meeting hers, "I want to apologize. I didn't mean to make you feel small. I was wrong to treat you that way. Grace looked up, surprised but sincere. Thank you, Madison. It takes courage to admit that. The two stood there for a moment, the tension dissolving, replaced by an unexpected connection. Across the hall, Principal Daniels approached, his presence steady. Grace, that was remarkable. I think you reached many more students today than I could have, he said warmly. Grace smiled modestly, a mixture of relief and pride settling in her chest. I just hope they understand. Oh, they do, Daniels assured her. And I believe this will change things here, starting with how we all see each other. The impact of Grace's speech rippled through the school over the following days. Conversations in classrooms and hallways shifted. Students who once dismissed her now nodded respectfully as she passed. Simon even caught her eye one afternoon and offered a small, genuine smile, the kind that speaks volumes without words. Even Madison seemed changed, speaking more thoughtfully and less judgmentally. Though she didn't become best friends with Grace, the distance between them narrowed appreciably. Grace herself felt the transformation within, not just in how others regarded her but in her own renewed confidence. She realized that sometimes, the most profound strength comes from embracing one's full story and allowing it to illuminate the parts others overlook. As the weeks continued, Grace was invited to participate more actively in school events, her voice becoming a fixture in community discussions. The janitor was no longer invisible, she had become a figure of inspiration and quiet authority. Through her honesty and grace, she had not only altered perceptions but had reminded everyone that beneath any title or role lies the shared human experience, complex, worthy, and deserving of respect. And in that realization, the school found a little more kindness, a little more understanding, and a lot less judgment. After the waves of reaction to Grace's talk had mostly settled, she found a moment in the quiet of the school library to sit and reflect on what she'd shared, and what hadn't yet been said. The afternoon sun slanted through the large windows, illuminating rows of books, casting long shadows that seemed to cradle the room in warmth. Grace's fingers traced the spines of the volumes, but her mind was elsewhere. The truth was that most people only saw her in the present moment, the janitor quietly moving through the halls, the guest lecturer standing at the podium. But beneath those scenes was the full complexity of her story, a life shaped by choices and turns that few could have guessed. Years ago, Grace had walked a very different path. She was once a corporate executive at a multinational company, navigating boardrooms and complex negotiations while dressed in sharp suits and surrounded by colleagues who envied her rising star. It was a heady, high-pressure world that demanded excellence but offered little room for personal fulfillment. I realized I was leading a life that wasn't truly mine, Grace had told Carla once, her voice tinged with bittersweet nostalgia during one phone call. I was chasing success but losing sight of what mattered most, authentic connections, meaningful work, making a real difference. So she made a bold shift, stepping away from the corporate ladder to pursue her passion for youth development and leadership education. Volunteering at community centers, teaching at the university, and yes, working at the school as a janitor, her way to stay grounded in everyday life and connect directly with young people. Her simple school uniform was not a sign of limitation but a deliberate choice. She wanted to be approachable, not distant, a presence students could engage with without barriers. Being on the ground floor of the school, quite literally taking care of the floors and spaces students moved through daily, kept her close to the rhythm of their lives in a way boardrooms never could. The story Grace shared during the assembly was just a fraction of herself, a carefully measured reveal to inspire rather than overwhelm. She knew the power of humility and the courage it took to stand exposed before an audience conditioned to expect less from her. Principal Daniels had seen that courage from the very beginning. Their professional relationship was one of mutual respect and support, strengthened over years of working side by side to build a more inclusive environment for both staff and students. One afternoon, as they reviewed the calendar of upcoming school events in his office, Daniels remarked quietly, "You have a way of seeing people that changes things, Grace. We need more of that here." Grace had smiled, feeling the profound trust behind his words. "I just try to remember what it's like to be overlooked," she replied. "And what it means to be given a chance." That chance was now blossoming into something bigger. The students who had shrugged off her presence were beginning to listen, not just to her words but to the lessons she lived every day. Madison, too, had become a surprisingly willing participant in this transformation. From teasing and exclusion, she moved toward cautious respect and eventually a kind of tentative friendship. Grace recognized in her the same restless search for identity that had marked her own youth, a need to belong, to be recognized beyond surface labels. There was an understated beauty in watching those shifts unfold, subtle but meaningful. The school itself felt a little different now, the air thickened with possibility and softened by understanding. Yet, beneath the calm, Grace nurtured a quiet resolve. She knew this was not merely about personal vindication but about opening doors for others who suffered from snap judgments and stereotypes. Her role as a mentor and lecturer grew. Invitations came from nearby schools and community groups eager to hear her speak, eager to hear the voice of someone who had lived the journey from invisibility to influence without compromising the values that mattered most. But Grace remained grounded in the place where it all began, moving through the halls with a purpose renewed, her presence a daily reminder that dignity exists in every honest act, no matter how small it may seem. As the school year marched on, Grace prepared to lead a special motivational workshop designed for students struggling with self-esteem and social exclusion. This was more than a speech, it was an invitation to see themselves differently, to recognize their potential beyond the labels others might place on them. When the day came, the room buzzed with nervous energy, students unsure of what to expect. Grace welcomed them with a warm smile, her eyes steady and compassionate. Throughout the session, she shared stories not just of her own journey but of countless young people she'd encountered, stories of setbacks and breakthroughs, of perseverance and hope. By the end, the students were visibly changed, more open, inspired, and willing to embrace their own stories rather than shrink from them. In the emerging hushed conversations and thoughtful expressions, Grace saw the seeds of transformation taking root. Her own heart swelled with the certainty that this was where she was meant to be, tethered to this community, challenging stereotypes with every step, every word, and every act of kindness. Behind the janitor's uniform, beneath the surface, was a woman whose life embodied resilience and authenticity, a leader not by title but by example. And in that realization, Grace found both peace and purpose, knowing that her true worth had been recognized not by surface judgments but by the lives she touched and the respect she earned day by day. As the sun set beyond the library windows, the quiet strength she carried into the world seemed a little less hidden, a little more shining, ready to light the way for others willing to see beyond the obvious and believe in the possibilities within. The days following Grace's workshop saw subtle yet undeniable shifts at the school. Students who had once whispered behind her back now greeted her with nods and genuine smiles. The once cold indifference had thawed into quiet respect. Even the ways teachers and staff interacted with her carried a newfound warmth. For Madison, the experience had sparked a deep self-reflection. The confident leader who had mocked Grace on that lunch break found herself becoming the subject of quietly critical glances from her peers. Some former friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with her past cruelty now laid bare beneath the light of Grace's humility and courage. It wasn't harsh punishment, but the social consequences were enough to shake Madison's self-assurance. One afternoon, she lingered by her locker, alone, tracing figures idly on the scratched paint. When Grace passed by, their eyes met briefly. Madison gave a tentative nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of the lesson learned, the regret accepted in silence. At the same time, Principal Daniels was called aside by the school district administrators. Whispers had circulated about the tension stirred among students during the incident with Grace, and they wanted reassurance that the school was fostering a safe and supportive environment. Daniels advocated for Grace wholeheartedly, praising her integrity, dedication, and the positive impact she had on the student body. Recognizing this, the district office formally commended the school staff and expressed interest in promoting Grace's programs throughout other schools in the district. However, Daniels also undertook conversations with the school's disciplinary committee about Madison's behavior. It was clear that while the incident did not warrant severe punishment, Madison needed to be held accountable and guided toward empathy and respect. A meeting was arranged, and Grace was invited as a key voice in the conversation. Sitting across from Madison and several administrators, Grace spoke candidly, not with anger or bitterness but with honesty and compassion. "Everyone deserves the chance to grow and change," Grace said. "Madison has shown a willingness to learn, and that's a powerful start." The discussion ended with a plan for Madison to participate in restorative justice activities, sessions designed to build empathy and repair harm done. It was a measured, constructive resolution that left space for healing and growth. Grace's vindication was not about vindictive triumph but about justice tempered with mercy. She wanted the school to be a place where mistakes could lead to understanding, not permanent condemnation. A week later, at the school assembly, Grace was invited to the stage again, but this time, as a celebrated member of the school community. The principal introduced her to applause, describing her as someone who lived her values with quiet strength and showed that roles don't define worth. Grace accepted the recognition with humility. As she looked out at the crowd, she noticed faces filled with respect, from teachers, students, and staff alike. She smiled softly, a deep sense of fulfillment coursing through her. After the applause faded, Grace spoke briefly. "I'm grateful for the chance to stand here, not as just the janitor, but as someone who believes in every person's potential. We all have stories worth telling and dreams worth chasing." The crowd erupted into renewed applause, the energy charged with sincere appreciation. For Grace, the moment wasn't just about public recognition but about the transformation in how this community now saw her, and how she saw herself. Later, as students filtered out of the auditorium, a group gathered around Grace. Madison was among them, more approachable now, expressing a genuine desire to learn and grow. Simon shared his thanks for the inspiration she'd provided. Even quiet students who had once been invisible found encouragement to speak up. Grace's phone buzzed with messages from community members eager to invite her as a speaker or mentor, a testament to how far her influence had spread beyond the school walls. That evening, Grace sat back in her modest apartment, a cup of tea warming her hands. She reflected on the journey, from the humiliation in the hallway to the applause on stage, from the harsh whispers to heartfelt apologies. Her heart brimmed with gratitude for the unexpected allies she'd found, Carla's support, Principal Daniel's faith, and the students who chose to open their minds and hearts. Though the path hadn't been easy, it had been authentic. Through adversity and acceptance, Grace rediscovered her own worth and helped others discover theirs. She paused, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on her bookshelf, a picture of her with a group of university students, their faces bright with hope and possibility. It reminded her why she had chosen this path, leaving behind corporate ambition for a real connection. In this moment, Grace felt a profound peace. She was not defined solely by her job or by others' judgments but by the depth of her character, her courage to speak her truth, and her desire to lift others. As the night deepened, she typed a message to her social media community. "If this story moved you, please share your thoughts below. How would you have reacted if you were in Grace's shoes? Remember, respect and kindness change everything." She smiled, fingers hovering over the keyboard before adding, "Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate strength, growth, and heart." See you in our next story. Closing her laptop, Grace leaned back, feeling ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing that her true worth had finally been seen, and that in being seen, she had helped others to see as well.